All right, this is section 6.1, and we are going to be simplifying radicals with an index of 2. Now, we've actually done this before in this section. We just haven't actually focused on the fact that it's a radical with an index in it. So in this case here, you use a radical symbol, a radical sign to indicate a root. The number underneath the radical sign is called the radicand. We've talked about, you've seen the square root symbols and all that. Okay. The index gives us the degree of the root. Now this is the part that's going to be different here. Now, the index is this number here. And when we do a square root, which is what we've done before in the past, the square root doesn't have a number here. Kind of like if I have a, that's really a to the first power. Okay, that's really a to the first power, even though we don't write it as a to the first power every time. Okay, so again, anytime you have a square root, there's always a power or an index of 2 there. We just don't write it. Okay, so a couple things here on directions to break down roots. So if I want to simplify roots, okay, what I'm going to do here is I've got to break down the number underneath the radical to match the index. So again, I want as many powers of 2 as I possibly can find. Then we're going to take that exponent. Every exponent that has a power of 2 and the index of 2 will cancel each other out. And then if the exponent does not go evenly into the index, you're going to leave whatever's left over inside that root. Okay, so if it doesn't match up with a power of 2, you leave it inside the root. Okay. All right, so let's look at examples here to start. Examples of breaking down roots, and we're going to start with simple ones. We're going to start with just numbers here in this first video. Okay, so we start with the first example here, and we are looking at the square root of 20. So what I need to do first is I need to break down the number 20 as far as I can go. So two numbers that multiply to be 20. That'd be 4 and 5. I know 5's prime, so I'm going to go ahead and circle it. 4 goes down to 2 and 2. Okay, so instead of 20 now, I have the square root of 2 squared times 1 5. Okay, so again, I'm going to separate these guys, 2 squared and the square root of 5. Okay, so now, again, this number here is actually a 2. We just don't write it there. So for every square and square root, they're going to cancel each other out, which means there's a 2 on the outside. And in this case, the 5, it doesn't have a power of 2. So because it doesn't have a power of 2, it's got to stay on the inside. So my final answer is 2 times the square root of 5. Okay, so being able to break down square roots with numbers only. Okay, let's look at the second example here. The square root of 12. Again, I want to break down 12. And as a matter of fact, let's change this one and let's make it 120. So it's a little bit more difficult. So 120. Okay, I'm going to break down 120 as 12 times 10. Well, I know that 10 is 5 and 2, and both those guys are prime. 12 is 4 and 3. Okay, 3 is prime, 4 goes to 2 and 2. Those guys are prime. So I have a 2 to the third, a 3, and a 5. Now, I don't want 2 to the third. I want powers of 2. So this is where our exponent rules come in. I'm going to break this up as 2 to the second times 2 to the first times 3 times 5. So underneath my root, I have 2 to the second times 2 to the first times 3 to the first times 5 to the first. Okay, so now, again, if I separate all of these, square root of 2 squared, square root of 2 to the first, square root of 3 to the first, square root of 5 to the first, okay, this power of 2 will cancel out with that square root. That 2's on the outside. And then everything else doesn't have a power of 2. These guys are 1s, so therefore they can't come out. So 2 times 3 times 5 is on the inside. Well, when I do this, I'm going to go ahead and multiply these guys out. So 2 times 3 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. So my simplified version is 2 times the square root of 30. Okay? So being able to break down square roots with just numbers is on this first page assignment. So you should be able to complete the first 4 problems on Class Kick.